just to close out this session, I want to turn to Venetoclax, which has taken us by storm the last year or two. And Tom, you were an early adopter of Venetoclax, so tell us about your experience and what do you think of the BELLINI clinical trial? Maybe you could describe what that is.
Sure. So Venetoclax is an inhibitor of BCL2, and basically we started using it in relapse refractory before selinexor was approved. We could get it in some patients by compassionate use, and in fact we had probably a 20% response rate with Venetoclax plus dex in just people that were triple class refractory. But what was found by a number of investigators is that those patients who have the 11-14 translocation, who likely have overexpression of the BCL2 pathway, that those people are exquisitely sensitive to this BCL2 inhibitor. And so they had really nice responses. A phase 2 was done, randomized bortezomib, BCL2 inhibitor, Venetoclax and dex versus bortezomib and dex, showing also a benefit in people 1 to 3 prior lines of therapy, all comers, and thus that instigated the BELLINI trial, which was a phase 3 randomized trial, again in patients 1 to 3 prior lines of therapy, and patients are randomized to the triplet versus the doublet of bortezomib and dex. And lo and behold, what we found is the triplet actually was more toxic. In fact, there was higher mortality. And it was updated at ASCO this year by Shaji Kumar, showing that that toxicity still persists, that there were more GI toxicity, there were more infections, there was some cardiac toxicity in the triplet versus the doublet. But in that study was a subset of patients that had the 11-14 translocations, and those patients really had exquisite responses. I think the overall response rate was well over 90%. And even I think out 2 or 3 years, these patients remained in remission. The PFS, that curve is an impressive curve in the 11-14s. So it's gonna, I think, be a great drug for the patients that have the translocation 11-14. But for everybody else right now, probably not going to move forward in that direction.
Natalie, thank you, Tom. Natalie, are you using it in clinical practice yet?
We've had, well, we would have, I mean, we have had a lot of trouble getting payers to approve it, even with the presence of 11-14. I think that's been the biggest hurdle. We've actually had a couple of patients that were treated through the VA where they've had nice responses. Again, I think this is going to be a drug for the 11-14. Unfortunately, because of the BELLINI trial results, it's really kind of put a damper on a lot of the research that I think we'd all like to see done. And, hopefully there's going to be a little bit of a recognition that there are going to be some patients who benefit from this, but it's been it's sort of put the brakes on a lot of things.
Peter, last word to you before we move on to
I agree that in 11-14 translocated in BCL2 high patients, a very active agent, and I think we'll see it eventually gain approval there. I do want to give a quick shout out to the daratumumab Venetoclax dex data that Nizar Balas presented at ASH back in December. Overall response rate of over 90%, and every single patient was in either a VGPR or CR, granted it was small numbers.
Yeah, I must say that I've used quite a lot of Venetoclax and very impressive results in the 11-14 population, as you've all said. Unlike Natalie, we seem to be able to get it quite easily, at least until a couple months ago. I don't know if it's changed. So I think certainly for the folks watching, if you have an 11-14 translocated patient, first of all, test for it, because you won't know unless you do the test. Secondly, I do think that, and a lot of the commercial labs aren't running 11-14 testing, so you have to be careful that they're actually measuring it. And if you do find somebody with that, it's a drug to consider either as a single agent or in combination.